Hi, I'm Maddy. I'm from Asura Studios. We're making Call of the Golden Valley, which is a first-person mystery narrative game about people going disappearing in the mountains of Victoria, Australia. And I've got Ben with me here.
Hello.
Who's our amazing composer and sound designer. And he's going to tell us all about how he's approaching the sound and the music for this game. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, well, yeah, there's lots to talk about. So I'm trying to think how this all began, really. But I think I started thinking about what this game was going to sound like, putting together a pitch for you, if you remember. So we first met and you were just describing the general setting and tone of the game, and then I sort of came back to you with a pitch, and right from that early point you were talking about referencing some folk music, having a bit of a historical layer within the music, and then also just getting that balance right of intrigue and mystery without overtly being scary.
Yeah, no jump scares.
So it was very much about developing like layers of intrigue without being overpowering. And I think that pitch that I gave you was exploring some of those different traditional instruments, and including like fiddle, and that was kind of a starting point for us.
Yeah, so I remember one of the first things that I told you was that someone who had been playtesting it, when people playtest the game, I really like to have them explain back to me what they got from the game rather than saying, oh, do you think it was this? Do you think it was that? I just want to hear what they think. And one person described an early build as cozy, which some people would be like, great. I was like offended. I was like, this is not meant to be a cozy game. It's supposed to be like a little like off kilter and a little creepy, a little sinister. And the night we met, maybe some beer was involved, but I was like, Ben, it can't be cozy. People are saying that it's cozy. And that's when you're like, yeah, music can help with that. So do you want to talk a little bit about how you're making it not cozy, not overly scary, but somewhere in between, but also without sounding like the soundtrack to Unsolved Mysteries?
Yeah, well, it's a challenging brief to get because there's a lot of subtlety in hitting sort of tension, intrigue, mystery, but not going for scary horror, like adrenaline. I mean, when you say them, they're different things, but musically there's quite a fine line. So yeah, we met and had that conversation, and it definitely got me thinking, and I started putting together some demo ideas to pitch to you. And on top of those ideas about the atmosphere, you also had a really strong idea to create a bit of a historic reference, a bit of a folk reference in the music. So I think what I showed you was the idea of creating a melody and then how you could repurpose that in different contexts, as if it was like a historic folk melody or in the style of, and then like that could become a big cinematic cue, or it could be like a little sting to introduce a scene. That idea of repurposing something. And throughout that process, I kind of kept coming back to the fiddle, like the violin in that folky way, just had so much flexibility and so much character, and it seemed like a really natural starting point for developing our palette of sounds. Also, it's also a theme of the game is there's a historic frame within the game. So it definitely fits it serves the story that we're trying to tell.
It fits on a couple levels, I think.
Yeah. So Maddie, before anyone else came onto the team, you'd been working on this project for a year or more.
Yeah, it's a little hard to say, but like at least 6 months. Yeah, somewhere between 6 and 12 months.
So at that point, you must have a pretty strong vision in your head of the look and feel and sound of the game. How was it bringing on collaborators and seeing where other people took that idea?
Oh, it was so good. So I think the thing that was very clear in my mind was sort of the story arc and maybe the emotional beats it was supposed to be hitting. I think this is where it's actually very helpful that I would not call myself a musician, because I hadn't given particular thought to what I actually wanted the music to sound like. I knew the purpose that I wanted the music to accomplish in the larger picture of things, of sort of underscoring these emotional moments and giving the right feel and really like augmenting sort of the landscape and the environment. But I hadn't really thought about like, this is specifically what I want it to sound like. So I mean, you can make a face or nod politely. I think I came into it with a pretty open mind, and part of the reason why, in particular, like, of all the people I talked to, I wanted to go with Ben, was he can really take an idea and then translate it into music rather than just sort of being like a composer for hire where you're like, cool, I want something in D minor with like the brass and the strings and whatever, because I don't have the time to give that level of direction. I don't have the musical background to give that level of direction. And also I'm a big believer in like bringing people's expertise and unique experiences and viewpoints to the table. So like in some ways this project will have my fingerprints all over it, but I also wanted to have the rest of the teams all over it.
Yeah. So
whenever we make games, it's this kind of like constant chicken and the egg problem, because everything it doesn't have to, but I think if you're doing it to its full potential, everything's feeding back into itself. So like the art informs the music informs the story informs the art, and like you just keep rolling this thing forward. But you have to start somewhere. So do you want to talk about starting this from nothing?
Absolutely. Maddie was giving me a music brief, and this was prior to having built environments in the game or finishing the narrative writing. Like, this was really early days.
We've done a lot in like 8 months.
We have. But at this point, I really just wanted to get in that visual and physical space of the high country and start to create music that related to that. So I just jumped online and found footage of a dash cam driving up into the mountains. And for me, that just gave me a context to start writing music to. And this is one of the first demos I began working on that ultimately we recently used for our pre-release trailer. So I'll play this. And this is a more refined version. It's not the first cut of this, but you can start to hear this quite simple, repetitive melody happening, and these layers of string sounds that they're a little bit fragile and a little bit intriguing and maybe a little dusty, or there's a lack of perfection in this, and that's really something I was going for. I wanted a few rough edges because the high country is this really old, rough and rugged country, and
yeah, this is a paved road in the dash cam footage.
Yeah,
but I've lived up there. With a 2-wheel drive car, you can't always assume that the roads are paved.
Yeah, but the sound of the game was never going to be big, sweeping, perfected, orchestral stuff. It has to have a few rough edges. So yeah, thank you, Dashcam.
Love the internet. Okay, so Marissa's room. This is the demo. Let's talk about the sound design for Marissa's room.
Yeah. Well, approaching the scoring, the first step that I took with this piece was I loaded up the environment that had been built, and there was no real functionality in place, but it was
not at that.
It was really just walking through the environment in a linear way and using that as a starting place to write a piece of music, and that in parallel with the really detailed story notes that we exchanged kind of gave me a really good starting place to start building that idea of tension and curiosity.
Yeah.
So once I handed you that quite linear piece, I think that sparked a bit of discussion about how can we translate something linear into a player experience that's completely, non-linear by nature.
Yeah, this is one of the big differences, I think, between sound for games and sound for movies, is that movies, that at 17 minutes and 54 seconds, that closet door is going to be opened, and that's, you control everything. In games, particularly in Marissa's room, there's several things that you can find, and we have no control over what order people find them in, and we don't want to have that control. But one thing that we sort of had fun thinking about was, how do we convey this idea? The original idea was, right, we keep finding things in her room, and we want to ratchet up the intensity of the music as sort of you're gaining more and more information and getting a bit clearer picture of what happened. Mm-hmm. But how do we do this when we have no idea what order people are going to find things in, or even when they're going to find them, and even if you can play through the demo without finding everything. So that's where Ben and his amazing Fmod skills and composition came into it. Do you want to talk a little bit about your parameters and your sweet transitions? Maybe
we can open up the Fmod and do a bit of a breakdown.
Cool.
We are in Fmod. So this is my audio middleware, which is basically a tool that we use in our game engine.
Yeah, so what Ben has done really nicely for me, and this is sort of how we hand off the audio to the programming, is we have this parameter at the top that says Marissa progress, and this indicates how far we are along into the story. And again, it's not linear, so different things might ratchet it up. And then I, as the programmer, all I have to do is say, cool, did we find something that should ratchet the music up? Yes?
Yeah.
Bump it.
Yeah. So it's just a bridge between my world and your world. And it simplifies what we're actually exchanging into one little value, because neither of us really understands what the other does, just that it works, right?
Yeah. And what's great about this is that Ben has done like, this is sort of the art part of it. He's made it really, really smooth. So it's pretty subtle. I mean, because we're talking about it and it's happening, it won't seem subtle, but in the game, it's actually pretty subtle.
Yeah. So shall we begin? Yeah. So, essentially,
this is the baseline.
The player's walking onto this farm down the driveway, and there's birds in the trees, the sun's shining. It's this quite lovely environment. And in playtesting, we've seen players spend quite a lot of time just exploring, looking in a tree,
patting the cows,
whatever it is. So this introductory loop has needed some refinement because we found it was way too repetitive to start with. And, you know, we may still decide that that's still the case. But
when you listen to it all day, every day.
Yeah, it's easy to go nuts listening to your own music. So the first progression is the players now entered the room and found an item, any item.
Yeah.
Is that correct? So,
well, any pertinent item.
Yeah. So basically that goes up, and then each of these little green lines is the next little checkpoint for that to progress. So how the music works is there's this 4-bar loop of chords that carries on, and then when the player finds a new item, that waits for the next appropriate time and switches to the next loop in sequence with itself. So
it's not an immediate transition, because that would have created kind of some hard edges, and also would have been more challenging from your perspective of making that a smooth, like, nice transition.
We were sort of hoping to serve the overall music rather than serve that specific moment of opening a letter or something, because
it's not a sting. It's just that this extra information adds to your understanding. And so we thought, as long as it comes eventually, you know, within some reasonable time frame, it's not like a cue of like, oh my gosh, you found something. That's a different type of sound design. This is messing with the background music.
Yeah. And it's a slow burn. It's not, this is the point of this scene. I think what we're getting at here is the point of the scene is there's a cumulative effect of this information. It's not a single discovery, but it's the whole picture coming together is what creates the emotion. And so there's not really a singular moment we're trying to hit.
No.
So the slower paced nature of the way this is set up works quite well.
The slow burn actually got me the first time I was playing this through with the sound like hooked in and installed. And like maybe I was a little bit tired as well, but you know, we get to this final conversation at the end of the demo and you have this clear picture and you're sort of having like a bit of a tough conversation and the music's going, and I turned to my partner and I was like, I'm getting feelings from this, even though I created these feelings, like I'm getting them thrown back at me, and it was really lovely, but also a little, I wasn't prepared for it. You caught me out, Ben.
I think that's the best feedback. It's the best feedback you can get. So you can start to hear these layers of instruments, the cellos coming in underneath, and this was all part of that short demo that I wrote. And there's quite a nice effect when you stretch it out like this and just ponder on it for a little extra time. Is like, as each layer comes in, it has a bit more weight to it, perhaps.
Yeah, it just gets a little bit heavier. And I mean, I know we were joking about you get sick of listening to your own music, but
Right.
other than the very base level, like sort of the neutral, like gentle one, which we've now added a little bit extra, I really don't get sick of listening to this. And like I spend a lot of time in Marissa's room listening to this music, whether I want to or not.
Well, I would say in my own music practice, having spent a lot of years making techno, you laugh, but
No, I love your techno years.
well, the essence is creating really slow changes over time and doing a lot with a little. And that's, for sure this isn't a club track, but it's about that slow change over time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a mindset that I really like to use.
Yeah.
And equally, I would add to that, performing as an electronic musician, a lot of the tech and techniques that I developed doing that is something I've been able to bring into game audio, because you're creating transitions, you're creating a sequence of events that you're triggering.
And you're setting moods.
And in this case, the player's triggering. But having a system-based approach, it's very much in line with what I spent doing for the last 10 years or so of my life.
I really love that the techno background is serving what superficially sounds nothing like that. Right? Narrative game set in Australia, techno. But I actually love it, and it makes perfect sense once you say it. I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So at this point, this is the transition between the most the final piece of information the player finds, which is we're not going to reveal.
No spoilers here.
But then there's a phone call that comes in.
Yeah, so you find this sort of like somewhat damning piece of information that, like, hopefully, if we've done our puppet mastering right, causes you as a player to become a bit concerned.
Yeah.
And then you get a phone call that comes in, which sort of summarizes it. This is the one that was giving you the feels. Summarizes it and really has you sort of reflect on what you found, what you know, and how you want to play that moving forward. So.
And then after this section ends, we reach the final progression. And that melody comes back in. And there we are. So that's our horizontal adaptive music setup for our demo level, Marissa's room.
Thanks for opening up the back end.
Well, thanks for joining us for this little breakdown of some of the music I've been creating. And I hope that's been interesting and given you a bit of an insight to the compositional process and some of the unique aspects of writing music in a game.
Yeah. We hope this was fun, informative, educational. I always like my chats with Ben. Definitely play the demo, play it with the sound on, get some headphones on, and pay attention for the sound transitions we were talking about. See how it makes you feel. Listen to the birds chirp. And yeah.
See you for the next devlog. Ciao.